There are places where science ends and darkness begins, where reality fractures and nightmares breathe. These are the tales of Carl Otto's dark anthology, The Djinn Particle by Carl Otto. And somewhere in the distance, a muezzin's call to prayer echoed off the ancient stones. Amir and Elder Mahmoud supported Nazari between them as they made their way to the barn. The morning sun cast long shadows, and villagers quickly looked away as they passed. Blood from Nazari's split lip dripped onto his collar, and each breath sent sharp pains through his ribs. "Easy now," Amir murmured as they helped him up the barn's wooden steps. "I have a first aid kit inside." The converted research station felt colder than before. Elder Mahmoud cleared space on the workbench, while Amir retrieved a battered medical kit. Nazari slumped onto a chair, his scientific pride as bruised as his body. "Let me see those ribs," Elder Mahmoud said, his hands gentle but practiced. "I was a field medic once upon a time." He pressed carefully along Nazari's side, drawing a sharp hiss of pain. "Bruised, not broken. You were lucky." "Lucky?" Nazari winced as Amir cleaned the cut on his lip. "They destroyed my equipment, our data." "They could have done much worse," Amir said quietly. "Last year, a Russian researcher, well, he wasn't as fortunate." Elder Mahmoud applied a cold compress to Nazari's face. "You saw it, didn't you? Standing beside Ibrahim. The form it takes when it's agitated." Nazari nodded slowly, then regretted the movement. "A figure of distorted air. I dreamt about it, but that's impossible." "Perhaps," Elder Mahmoud interrupted gently, "we should stop thinking in terms of possible and impossible." He exchanged a look with Amir. "Tell him about the archives." Amir hesitated. After what just happened? "He's already involved now," the elder said. "He needs to know everything." Elder Mahmoud moved to close the barn's windows, checking outside before drawing the heavy curtains. "The archives," he began, his voice low, "are hidden beneath the temple. They contain records dating back centuries, documentation of the Djinn's manifestations, its interactions, its transformations. The cult keeps them sealed," Amir added, still tending to Nazari's injuries. "Even most of their own members don't have access. But my grandfather, he was one of the archivists, before Ibrahim's father changed everything." Nazari shifted, wincing at the pain. "Changed what?" "The relationship with the Djinn," Elder Mahmoud said carefully. "For generations we were guardians, observers. We documented its phenomena, studied its nature, though not with your modern instruments. There was balance, respect going both ways. Then Ibrahim's father became high priest." Amir's voice carried old bitterness. "He believed we could do more than just observe. He thought we could communicate with it, control it even." "That's when people started disappearing," Elder Mahmoud added, "when the temporal distortions began affecting larger areas. The archives contain warnings about this, about the danger of treating the Djinn as a tool rather than a force of nature." Nazari pressed the cold compress against his face, his scientific mind racing despite the pain. "These archives, they contain actual data, measurements, observations." "More than that," Amir said. "They have samples, physical evidence of transformations going back hundreds of years. Metal turned to crystal, just like that watch. Objects that exist in multiple states. Things that..." He hesitated. "Things that shouldn't be possible. In the archives there is also another secret room that only the high priest goes in." "The real reason Ibrahim banned outsiders," Elder Mahmoud said quietly. "He wants the power of the Djinn for himself, and I believe the power is in that room in the archives. We need to see those archives and get into that secret room," Nazari said, straightening despite his bruised ribs. "Impossible," Amir shook his head. After what just happened? Not impossible, Elder Mahmoud interrupted. Difficult, yes. Dangerous, certainly. But not impossible. He reached into his robe and withdrew what looked like an ancient key, its metal strangely iridescent. If we can find a way in the temple, I can get us in the archive and in that room. We should rest, Elder Mahmoud said, noting how Nazari winced with each movement. The guards will be watching closely tonight. Better to wait until tomorrow when you're stronger. Amir produced a small bottle of pills from the medical kit. Here, local painkillers, strong ones. They'll help you sleep. Nazari wanted to protest, to start planning immediately, but his ribs throbbed in painful agreement with their suggestion. He accepted 2 pills and a glass of water from Amir. Tomorrow then, Elder Mahmoud said, moving toward the door. We'll return after morning prayers, when the temple guards change shifts. After they left, Nazari settled onto his cot, the painkillers already making his thoughts fuzzy. His last conscious observation was of that strange heatwave distortion near his equipment again, before darkness claimed him. The dream came vividly. He was following the boy from earlier, Hamid, through narrow mountain paths he hadn't noticed before. The child moved with practiced ease, occasionally turning to press a finger to his lips for silence. They came to a small cave opening, barely visible behind a tumble of rocks. Inside, the passage twisted unnaturally, as if the stone itself couldn't quite maintain its shape. At a junction of 3 tunnels, the figure of distorted air waited. Its form rippled with barely contained fury, ancient eyes blazing. It moved to block their path, its presence radiating hostility. But when Nazari pressed forward, the figure let him pass. A sense of resignation, as if it was bound by rules older than itself. The tunnel opened into the archives, rows of shelves stretching impossibly far in the dim light. And there at the far end, a door with glyphs that made his vision blur when he tried to focus on them. The figure appeared again, but different now. Less hostile, more expectant. It raised a flaming hand, pointing to the door, then to Nazari, then to its own chest. Nazari woke with a startle, sunlight streaming through the barn's windows. The painkillers had worn off, his ribs protesting as he sat up. But his mind was sharp, focused. He grabbed his notebook, sketching the cave entrance, the tunnels, the symbols on that door before they could fade. Something caught his eye, a fine layer of dust on his boots, dust that looked exactly like the limestone powder from the mountain caves in his dream. Nazari stared at it, his scientific mind struggling to rationalize its presence. Dreams didn't leave physical evidence. Unless... He pushed himself up from the cot, ignoring his protesting ribs, and moved to the workbench. By the time the morning sun began streaming through the barn's windows, he had filled several pages with sketches and notes, comparing them to the old maps of the mountain, surrounded by hastily scrawled notes and sketches from his dream. His ribs still ached, but the fierce determination in his eyes suggested he'd moved beyond physical discomfort. When Elder Mahmoud and Amir arrived, they found him comparing old drawings to his maps of the mountain. "You should be resting," Amir said, setting down a fresh thermos of coffee. "I think there might be a way in," Nazari replied, not looking up. "There has to be a way in." Elder Mahmoud leaned over the sketches, his expression grave. "These tunnels, they match old stories, passages the original guardians used before the temple was built." A soft knock at the barn door made them all freeze. Amir moved cautiously to answer it, then relaxed. "Hamid?" The boy from yesterday slipped inside, his sensor cold now, held close to his chest like a shield. His eyes went immediately to Nazari's drawings. "I can help you," Hamid said. It wasn't a question. "The old ways, the paths my brother found before." He trailed off, swallowing hard. You know these tunnels? Nazari asked gently. Hamid nodded. We used to play there before, hidden from the guardians. He moved to the workbench, pointing to one of Nazari's sketches. This one leads behind the temple, where the rocks look like sleeping giants. The Djinn. He hesitated. It doesn't watch there as much. The three men exchanged looks. Elder Mahmoud knelt beside the boy. Hamid, could you show us? It's dangerous, the boy whispered. The shadows move differently in there. But he looked at Nazari's bruised face, then at the crystalline watch still sitting on the workbench. You want to help my brother, don't you? To understand what happened to him. Yes, Nazari said simply. Hamid seemed to come to a decision. Tonight, when the moon sets, the guardians will be at evening prayers. He traced a path on the map with one small finger. Meet me where the old shepherd's trail crosses the stream. I'll show you the way. Hamid, Amir started. If Ibrahim finds out, he won't. The boy's voice carried a certainty beyond his years. The Djinn, I think it likes me. Sometimes it helps hide things, from those who think they control it. He turned to leave, then paused. Bring salt, and don't, he shuddered slightly, don't look too long at any shadows that move against the wind. After Hamid left, silence filled the barn. Finally, Elder Mahmoud spoke. We should wait until you're stronger. No, Nazari interrupted. Every day we wait gives Ibrahim more time to... He gestured at his equipment. To destroy more evidence. To hide whatever's in that room you mentioned. Then we rest today, Amir said firmly. Gather our strength. And tonight. He looked at the darkening mountains through the window. Tonight we see what the old passages remember. The others nodded, each lost in their own thoughts about what evening would bring. Outside, clouds gathered around the mountain peaks, as if the very sky was conspiring to hide what they planned to do. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Amir checked and rechecked their supplies, while Elder Mahmoud studied ancient texts, searching for any details they might have missed. Nazari dozed fitfully, knowing he would need his strength, but his dreams were filled with shifting shadows and the strange, distorted figure